Good evening. I'm Nick Barth. I'm from MicroStrategy. I'm a sales engineer at MicroStrategy, and I'm all that stands in between you, beer and pizza, and also the chance to win an Echo Dot, which you must take part in later on. Now, I'm going to give you something less than a technical presentation. This is more about the human face of governance and freedom. And I'm going to start off that human face by taking a look at a cafe. So I'm very glad to be the third presenter here. I can't say that normally, but I am very glad to say that I'm the third presenter because the two people who came before me have queued me up beautifully. And this is one of the things, we've talked about ingredients and that kind of thing. This is a cafe. We've got people queuing up to get coffee. We've got a bunch of baristas making coffee. The trouble with many analytical tools that are out there, and I mean visualization tools, I mean data science tools and so on, is that they're not happy for you to be a customer. They're not happy for you just to want a cup of coffee. They want you to jump the barrier and become a barista. Now, for the people in the room, that might be fine. You might all want to know how to make the best flat white, how to be a champion cappuccino maker, but for your users, for your customers, for your consumers, for the people who benefit from your minds, your brains, and what you do every day, that isn't necessarily the case. But as I said, if you believe what a lot of analytical tool vendors tell you, then everyone wants to be a barista. And that leads to a fundamental challenge. If you've got these tensions between governance and freedom, if you've got these tensions between people who are skilled and people who are not skilled, you end up with fragmented silos of data, as Mike queued up for me beautifully. You end up with low adoption of tools, and you end up with enterprise needs which cannot be served by the tools that you've ended up acquiring and purchasing. You've got islands of business intelligence, you've got silos of data, and bringing those things together is very, very tricky. So I'm going to touch on some of the people. I talked about having a human face. I'll touch on some of the people that are responsible for this. So here's my enterprise. We have within the enterprise these characters, which will be named in a minute. So we've got business analysts, we've got data analysts, we've got consumers, we've got data scientists, and we've got data engineers. And I'm just going to define what I mean by those different people in a minute, and we're going to come back to these people. And really, this is a kind of personal presentation because all the things that these people have, all the things I'm quoting are things that people have said to me in the course of my work, building applications in MicroStrategy, building applications against data warehouses, and so on. So these guys translate into these roles within the business. Let's take another look at that. Let's present this in a different way. So we've got people who engineer data, people who engineer data lakes and data vaults and so on, people like Luke and his team, the people who take that data and produce data sets which are then consumable by other tools. Data scientists, we know what data scientists do. Business analysts are the people who take those data sets and visualize them in order to pass that information on to consumers. Reports, dashboards, alerts, and other ways of presenting information. Now, if you go back through the history of BI, and I have to admit I'm a bit of an expert in the history of BI because I've been around for so long, there was a time when I believed that all BI was about self-service, but I was wrong. And the reason I was wrong is because IT and technical people, like the guys in this room, had kind of grabbed BI and said, anything to do with report development, dashboard design, anything like that is our province. So we are IT, we govern that. And the business, your consumers. And the trouble with that was that the business wanted often to be a bit more agile than IT was able to be. Change controls and that kind of thing didn't really suit business intelligence. Business intelligence is a funny software category. It's a really odd software category. You don't really build an application and put it out there and say, you use it, because the application is being developed by the end users all the time. They're always building stuff. They're always creating reports, creating dashboards, and and they always want more stuff to be developed. So what are you building? You're building a platform of data, a platform of interpretation, a semantic layer, which can then be used to build the application. And the application is being built all the time, every day. You all know this. So it's not much of a surprise that a few years ago, a bunch of vendors came along and said, tell you what, you can do it all yourself. You can be entirely self-sufficient. You can build your own dashboards, reports, you can supply your own information to data scientists, and you can be your own consumers. The challenge with that is that these tools, a lot of these visualization tools that we end up using, kind of require clean data. And we know that they require clean data because of the huge prevalence of data prep tools that are now available on the market. I was at the Gartner show a couple of months ago in Docklands, and it was enormously surprising how many data prep tools had decided to turn up, to spend the money to put a stand up at the Gartner show. I mean, just a huge shift from a few years ago where it would have been guys like us, like MicroStrategy and Tableau and Click and so on, all the old guard, you know, the usual suspects there. Yeah, they were there, but actually they were being, you know, we're almost being elbowed aside by their data prep tools. So why is that? Well, partly that's what Mike was talking about at the first presentation. Partly that's what Luke has been talking about. But partly that's because these visualization tools really like clean data. They like consumable data sets. And if you provide them with something that's a bit too tricky, then you have to go through data prep processes. So your data analysts, in a lot of enterprises that I come across, in a lot of enterprises, the data analysts still work in IT. They're still primarily technical. They're still kind of writing SQL all day long. We'd like to change that. The idea of what we're doing and what I'm going to be talking about in a few moments is that the data analysts can join the business, that we can make that process of producing a data set for a data visualization tool kind of code-free, kind of clean, kind of easy, so that your data engineers can get on with the process of collating data, bringing it together, storing it, and so on, preparing it for analytics, and they can pass that process of providing data sets to end users and tools and so on to the business. They can be largely non-technical. Because the reason this is so important is because if you don't allow an enterprise to do this properly in tools, things fall back to Excel. One of our customers, who will remain nameless, is a large department store. They're currently, you know, kind of in financial difficulties, as all department stores are, and we're kind of, you know, they're looking at their BI tools, and we're kind of under threat. We're kind of going, well, we might not use any BI. What are you going to do? What are you going to run your business on? We're going to run it on Excel. It's just crazy. This is a mature business. It's been around for years. They've been using MicroStrategy for more than 10 years. And because they've just been taken over by a set of administrators, and they're trying to save money, they're going to move back to Excel. It's like Excel is the default. It's a real challenge. It's a challenge that we can tackle. So I'm going to talk about those characters that I mentioned earlier, and I'm going to just come up with some of the things that I've heard from people like that, and things that people like this believe, people like, you know, maybe people in the room believe. So firstly, is it okay, this is a data engineer, is it okay to assume that BI tools are all fast and scalable? Is it okay to assume that my visualization tool can handle all of the various analytical things that end users want to do, basket analysis, churn, that kind of thing, you know, within the visualization tool? Is that okay? Is it okay to assume that? Well, it isn't necessarily okay. And the reason it isn't necessarily okay is because a lot of these tools, a lot of the visualization tools that are out there, are merely replicating the report to cube relationship that BI started out with. So as I said, I go back a long way. I remember BI before the data warehouse. I remember where you had to put data into a cube before you could start to analyze it. Before you could start to visualize it, you had to stick it in a cube. These cubes were called S-base, they were called TM1, they were called System W, they were called IRI Express, but you had to put it into a cube before you started because there was no such thing as a data warehouse. And then people like Kimball came along and they started designing data warehouses, and wasn't that great? And we're putting data into data warehouses, and then a new set of desktop productivity tools hits the market. And all of these new desktop productivity tools are replicating that cube visualization relationship. So what have we got? We've got a lack of governance. We've got data being replicated around. Mike talked about data sources. The data sources are going all the way out. They're federating out into these further and further fractured data sources, all the way out to end users with data on their laptops, completely unsecured, completely ungoverned, and very, very unperformant, very, very poor performance. So organizations, enterprises that depend on these tools tend to hit brick walls sooner or later. Second, here's my data analyst. So we're moving over to the person that creates data sets for business analysts to create visualizations. So is it okay to assume that the data I'm sharing is already trusted and governed? So in other words, this person is asking, is it okay to assume that the governance that is enshrined within the data warehouse or the data lake or the data vault that I'm using is enough? Because I'm going to query some of that data, I'm going to pull that data through into my tool, and then I'm going to share it with other people. And of course, once I've shared it with other people, it's the Wild West. That data can go anywhere. That data can go anywhere with a license to use this dashboard or whatever. What's happened to the governance? The governance is over there in the database. It's not here in the BI tool anymore. It's not here in the visualization in the dashboard. I cannot be sure that I can create a data set that I can share with a business analyst, or a business analyst can create a dashboard that they can share with somebody else that won't breach, the security of the organization, that won't breach GDPR, that won't allow information out of the organization that shouldn't leave the organization. So this data analyst can't be sure. It can't be okay to assume that the data they share is already trusted and governed. It might be already trusted and governed. By the time it gets into the BI tool, it no longer is. We're now on to the business analyst, Jen, the business analyst. Firstly, is it okay for me to choose the visualization or reporting tool that I like the best? Well, actually, out of all the things that I've been talking about today, this is the thing I come across the most. More and more and more organizations are allowing business analysts to rule the roost, to decide which visualization tool they should use. Tell you what, Power BI, it sounds like it's free. Might as well use Power BI. Tableau, they were around here with their credit card machine selling copies by the number of 5, 5 copies, 10 copies. It's great. It's great. It makes it very easy to consume, very easy to buy. But enterprises are, again, returning to that stage where they have a patchwork quilt of different visualization and reporting tools across the enterprise. If you were the CFO of an organization and you said, right, guys, you said to your team, we're going to choose a financial consolidation tool or platform to run the management reports and the statutory reporting that we need to turn out as an enterprise. If you said to your team, guess what? There's 5 or 6 people in the room. Why don't you all go out and buy a few licenses of your preferred financial reporting solution, run your reports for a quarter, and at the end of the quarter, come back and we'll see which one works best. Now, would you be able to close the books? Of course not. You've got 6 people in the room. You've just acquired 6 different financial consolidation systems. You close the books 6 different ways. You're going to have 6 different sets of numbers. No CFO would keep their job if they did that. And yet that's exactly how we acquire BI. Enterprise after enterprise has a patchwork quilt of tools, and they come up with not one version of the truth, but multiple versions of the truth. I'm still with Jen, I'm afraid. Is it okay for everybody to be a dashboard hero? So actually, back to my cafe at the opening, does everyone want to be a barista? No. Some people just want a cup of coffee. So why is it that visualization tools are kind of marketing directly to the people who want to be dashboard heroes? Why aren't they building products that appeal to end users in all the different ways in which end users like to use data, on mobile devices, on their web browsers, through embedded applications. Why is it that the dashboard has become the kind of final solution? Everything, you know, if I have a hammer, that must be a nail. Everything must be solved by a dashboard. Dashboards are great, by the way. We love them. On to data scientists. I have nothing against data scientists at all. I love data scientists. But one of the things it's very difficult with business intelligence and data scientists, because we come up with a platform that delivers, you know, huge complexity, that can manage huge complexity. We can embed R in, we can embed Python into our platforms, that kind of thing. Are we conflicting? Are we competing with data scientists? And I have to say, no, the point about business intelligence as a practice, it doesn't matter what platform you're talking about, is actually automation. The reason business intelligence products exist is to automate processes that would otherwise be dealt with manually. I mean, I can do a dashboard on that whiteboard over there. Can I share it with 1,000 people? Of course not. So the whole point about business intelligence software and practices and applications and so on must be to take the work of a few people and multiply it out, so that you can take the insight created by a few people and automate that process, that insight is shared and so on with as many end users who need it. So in the case of a data scientist, I come across data scientists who do great work, they have great acuity with tools, they provide great insight, but then the output is shared via email and Excel and PowerPoint and maybe some other visualization tools. But that output process is then not automated. Up to then, everything's been automated. And then suddenly, it becomes a manual process. And that's when you slow down. Back to the dashboard hero, one of the challenges with being a dashboard hero is you've created this great dashboard. It took you a few weeks or a few months to develop it. Again, with a data scientist, you created a great algorithm. Took you a few weeks or a few months to develop it. Now you're saddled for the rest of your life with sharing that output with the business. You're saddled with the responsibility of modifying it, of tweaking it, of moving that pixel moving that icon, that logo 1 pixel to the left. That shouldn't be your job. That should be the job of IT, of the infrastructure team, the people who then take your content and make sure that what's published is credible and trusted and so on. Your consumers, of course, they're different. They just want answers. And your data engineers, really, at heart, they just want governance. They want to make sure that the data they're producing, that they worked so hard to become trusted, is trusted. And it's trusted all the way out to the consumers, to the store managers, to the CEOs, to everyone else within the organization who needs to consume it. So this is about data stewardship, isn't it? This is a definition of data stewardship that I grabbed off Wikipedia. So we've got some real keywords here: definition, metadata, usage, data fitness, and protection. But a lot of data stewardship is basically people writing queries. So data stewardship is not a human query generator. And yet, if you look at the way that a lot of BI, analytics, and reporting is done, it's people writing SQL scripts. It's people manually writing SQL scripts. So are they writing the right SQL? Are they doing the right things? Is it efficient? And so we end up with silos of data and analytics and interpretation. And people who must rely on IT for new data sets, you've got multiple definitions of the same thing. There's no trust in the data, or there's little trust in the data, and people who just love what they're used to. So the challenge is that needs to be managed, that needs to be published, that needs to be governed, and IT needs to be involved in that process. because otherwise we've got multiple versions of the truth, no security or security in the hands of the analysts, the data analysts at the end, no audit traced, high costs resulting from redundancy, lots of redundant systems, and we're overwhelmed by the number of requests for different data sets. So this is the plug. We've got an answer. It's called MicroStrategy, and I'm just going to go through some of the aspects of MicroStrategy that tackle what we've been talking about, or what I've been talking about. So firstly, let's put a federation layer between data and tools. Let's not think of the tool itself as being the endpoint. Let's have a federation layer, or rather it is the endpoint, but it's not the middle point. There needs to be a middle point in between. We're going to call that federation layer, which is responsible for data federation and governance, we're going to call it a semantic graph. It's not a term we coined, it's actually a term Gartner coined. We're very grateful for them for doing that. Well, we'll talk about the semantic graph in a moment. So the semantic graph is not just metadata. The semantic graph is not just a dictionary, because as I said at the top of the presentation, the thing about business intelligence is it's evolving all the time. It's moving and changing all the time because end users are creating their own reports, they're creating their own metrics, they're creating their own definitions. So, aspects of this federation layer, yes, data abstraction, that filtering between tables and rows and columns and joins and things that business users don't necessarily understand, and business terminology, the sort of entities that business users do understand. That needs to have a query engine. It needs to have not only query engine, data governance, content. It also needs to have a presentation of content, what's available to the end users. Because this is a moving picture, because this is changing all the time, it needs to have telemetry built into that graph. So I like to think of the semantic graph as being a little bit like the social graph. You know, Facebook or any other of the social tools is based on that idea of a social graph. And the social graph is not static. And the social graph is valuable because it's changing. And because it's changing, you need to understand how it's changing in order to derive value from it, in order to derive what's going on, what's happening, what's working, what's not. And so once you've got that telemetry going on, real-time telemetry, real-time gathering what's going on in the semantic graph, you could use that for lots of other tools, other things. So for example, you can start to recommend content to other users. If you like that, you're going to like this. If you use this, you're going to like that as well. Did you know that these users in this part of the business are using this content? Number 3, we're going to use this to deliver single version of the truth, not single source of the truth. So single source of the truth implies that you've got one place, one database, one data source where sales is expressed. But as we've just heard, you might have 30 or 40 different places where sales is expressed across your organization, or revenue, or net margin. What's important for an end user is to know that if they pick that object and drag it onto that visualization, they're going to get the definition of sales, or the definition of net margin, and that the platform underneath is going to take care of where that data needs to come from in order to get the data in the context that they're putting it in. I'm looking at sales, I'm looking at orders, I'm looking at customers, I'm looking at prospective customers. They're all kind of the same things, but expressed very differently and maybe from different data sources. So as I said, the challenge of BI is over there on the right. Lots and lots of data sets, each with their own definitions of the truth. We'd like to get to this, where the data sets are a product of that semantic graph, are the product of those single definitions of the truth. Now, once we've got that, there's other things we can do. Because once we've got that, we can use the platform to arbitrate between different workloads. A lot of BI tools are effectively desktop productivity tools on steroids. And therefore, if you've got 500 people who come into work on a Monday morning and fire up their visualization tool, you tend to have 500 threads firing into your data warehouse, all asking more or less the same thing at the same time. Wouldn't it be better if this platform was able to arbitrate between the different workloads? So it might say, these guys are more important, we're going to give them more threads to the data warehouse. Or, tell you what, we knew that query was going to happen, so we pre-cache the data in memory. We don't have to pre-cache everything, but we need to pre-cache the stuff that's more important. And that can help reduce the workload on the various data tools, data sources. Now, again, once we've got a platform, we can do some other cool stuff. So actually, these visualization tools, MicroStrategy is a visualization tool, there are other visualization tools on this slide, these visualization tools all pretty much connect to source data in roughly the same way. Web services has been a revolution across the industry. We all have connectors that allow us to acquire data from data sources, and again, these are pretty standard. So once we've got a data federation platform, provide it with a series of connectors for popular products so that our gens of the world, our business analysts, can choose which visualization tool they want to use. But the point is that they're acquiring their visualizations from curated data sets from our semantic graph. Those data sets are either live queries back to the data source or they're pre-cached, depending upon the performance that Gen requires. And of course, they're governed. They're governed by the platform. So we know how many times Gen has used that particular data set, how many times Moss has used that particular data set. We can figure out whether that data set is popular or not, whether it's useful or not. And in a similar fashion, we can also use that semantic graph to support data science. And again, instead of asking data scientists to spend 80% of their time in data cleanup, we can give them pre-curated data through the semantic graph down into the data sources. And we can give them, again, useful connectors and tools that allow them to implement scripts, programs in R, scripts in Python. They can write code in whatever tool they're using, and they can just connect into that semantic graph, use it as a data source, or use it as a data store. Why do I want to use the semantic graph as a data store? Well, because I'm using the semantic graph as my chief publishing engine to get information out to end users. So that process of automating data distribution is in the semantic graph. It comes as a result of having that server platform in place. And then the final thing, and I'm probably just about to run out, again, beer and pizza. And then the final thing I'd just like to kind of touch on is imagine a life beyond dashboards. Imagine a BI reporting existence when someone's come up with something that isn't a dashboard. Well, what isn't a dashboard? Well, in a lot of cases, you don't need a whole dashboard. And in a lot of cases, a dashboard itself is a difficult thing to find. Where did I put it? Which folder is it in? Which portal is it on? Well, how about a card with some information on it that finds you? That when I'm talking to a customer, the card for that customer pops up and tells me everything I need to know about that customer. That when I'm investigating a supplier, and I'm on the phone with that supplier, I can float my mouse pointer over the supplier's name on the web page, and it pops up with a card. That when I'm on the road and I'm visiting a customer or a supplier or a store, for example, that my phone buzzes me and says, I notice that you're on the way to the Ipswich store, maybe you'd like to check out the card for the Ipswich store. So this is information finding you. It's the platform itself pushing information out to end users. And it's doing that in a way that's far more useful, far more accessible and consumable than a dashboard. Because we don't all have to be dashboard heroes. So I'd like to introduce to you the industry's first enterprise semantic graph. We've got, you've probably seen them, we've got the map of the intelligent enterprise. The semantic graph is on there. Lots of other things about MicroStrategy are on there. And we'll be happy to talk you through it. And then the final thing I'd like to mention is, how do you win an Echo Dot? Well, you either need skill or luck, or a combination of skill and luck. So we have some jigsaws at the back. We honestly honestly, the person who does the jigsaw in the smallest time, the shortest time, will win an Echo Dot, but you all have to have a go. Or you can just fill in a form, and that's the kind of lucky one. So with that, I'd like to say thank you very much for your attention. It's been lovely meeting you all today, this evening, and beer and pizza.